Guys, you asked me for it. I worked very hard experimenting day and night literally to come up with a recipe for almond flour, coconut flour, keto friendly boiled dumplings, and these are done in the Jamaican tradition. So guys, here it is. You saw it first right here at Not For Islands Living. I have created almond flour and coconut flour boiled dumplings. Please watch this video and see how it is done. Good morning guys, and welcome back to another episode of Not For Islands Living, Burst of Flavor Cooking. Many of my viewers have been asking me to make boiled dumpling with either almond flour or coconut flour, and I've been experimenting with the process. As most of you know, almond flour and coconut flour do not have gluten, and as such, once it hits water, the flour starts to dissipate rather than to glue together, because it doesn't have the gluten to actually keep it together. So usually what we are using is eggs to help it to bind, to help the flour to bind together. And it has worked perfectly, as you have seen, for my fried dumplings. However, I've been having a little challenge with the boiled dumplings. This morning I'm going to take you guys through my experiment. I'm going to be trying to make boiled dumplings again with coconut flour and with almond flour. I'm going to be using eggs as my binding agent, and for some of the dumplings I'm going to be putting in psyllium husk to see how that affects the texture of the dumpling. For some of the dumplings I'm also going to be adding a little bit of vinegar. I have my vinegar right here, to see if that cuts out any of what some people are calling rawness when you use egg. And so I'm going to see if I use vinegar in some of the dumplings that will also cut down on the rawness without giving us an extra taste. And for those who want to use salt, I'll be putting a spritz of salt in all of the dumplings, and I'm going to use these food coloring to differentiate what dumplings have what. So I'm going to be doing some plain ones, which is just coconut flour with salt and eggs to bind, which is like the traditional Jamaican dumpling, which is just flour and salt and water. I'm going to be doing the same with almond flour to see which one of these flours hold up best. Then I'm going to be doing some with psyllium husk, both almond flour and coconut flour with psyllium husk, to see if the psyllium husk adds a better dimension to the texture of the dumplings. And then I'm also going to be adding to my third test batch of dumplings some vinegar, to see if the vinegar will help any with taking out any of the egg flavors. And that is because, guys, again, the traditional Jamaican dumpling is flour, salt and water. We're adding the eggs in this case because the flour does not glue together, it does not bind, because these are gluten-free flours, and so we need to add a binder, but we do not want necessarily the taste of the binder. And so that is why I'm going to do one of my experiment batches with the vinegar, to see if the vinegar cuts down that egg taste. Okay guys, so here we go. Since I'm going to be using egg as the basic binding agent in this recipe for our batches of dumplings, I'm just going to go ahead and break 4 eggs into a bowl and whisk them together, and I'll use them as I'm going along in each dumpling batch. Set this aside. And now I'm going to start my first batch, which I'm going to use almond flour. 1/4 cup of almond flour, a spritz of salt, and about half of an egg. And now, as is the traditional way, I'm going to get my hand in here and I'm going to knead this together. And as you can tell, guys, this is going to be pretty difficult to form into the traditional way, and so I'm going to use a spoon to help me and just put this into the bag that I have designated for the almond flour, the simple almond flour egg dumpling. And while it is in the bag, I might try to form it a bit better. So I'm going to put it here into the bag and try to form it in the bag. And guys, you'll understand, because in phase 2, what I'm actually going to do with these dumplings, all of them, is I'm going to set them in the freezer to take shape. And so this is the stage where I'm just going to try to form that round shape. And while it is in the fridge, it will harden to the shape that we are accustomed to for our dumpling. So it's about that, roughly. Not perfect, but it's roughly that shape. And so this is the first batch of dumplings, which is just almond flour, a spritz of salt, about 1/4 of 3 eggs, which is about 3/4 of 1 egg, and that's it. We're gonna put this in the freezer to freeze before we put it in any hot water to boil it. For the second batch of this first experiment, I'm going to be using coconut flour, about 1/4 cup, a spritz of salt, and again probably about an egg, because coconut flour is a little bit more absorbent than almond flour. It is a drier flour and will absorb more moisture than almond flour. So I've put about an egg in there, and I'm going to combine now. And as you can see, this is actually soaking up more of the egg, far better than the almond flour did. So this one will be much easier to form into that round shape. So this is the 1/4 cup of coconut flour, a spritz of salt, and 1 egg rolled into a dough. I'm going to use some food coloring on this one, so that when I'm ready to boil it, I will see how it comes out. But knead it very well, guys, because it's drier, the tendency will be to break apart faster once it touches the water. So this orange dumpling is our simple coconut flour egg mixture. And now for experiment 2, batch 3. This is the experiment where I'll be adding the psyllium husk. I'll start again with the 1/4 cup of almond flour, half of an egg. I'm going to use a spritz of salt, and of course, guys, the salt is optional. Some people don't use salt, and that is fine. And the next ingredient I'm going to use here, which varies from the others that we've done before, is I'm going to add a teaspoon of psyllium husk. And this, of course, guys, is to just test the various consistencies that I'm getting from using different flours and different additives. So this one has the psyllium husk. Get in here and start to knead. So this forms nicely. I'm going to color this one. Let's see what color I'm going to use, and place it in the designated bag. So I've put a little bit of blue food coloring on it. And for this 4th batch, I'm going to use 1/4 cup of coconut flour, a spritz of salt, the last bit of the egg, which is about an egg or a little less than an egg based on how this looks. And a teaspoon of psyllium husk. Need the mixture. So I'm going to form this dumpling, and this is the dumpling that has coconut flour, salt, egg, and psyllium husk. I'm going to put a bit of food coloring on it and put it in its bag. So I put some red food coloring on this one and I'm going to put it in this bag. And now for the last two batches that I'm going to make, I have 1.5 eggs in here and a tablespoon of vinegar mixed together. So this is what's going to be the new addition, and I'm going to see how this affects the consistency as well. But I presume that it should also have an effect on the actual taste of the product. So I'm going to add here my 1/4 cup of almond flour and half of an egg. Remember, I had 1.5 eggs in here, so this is half of an egg. A teaspoon of psyllium husk, and optionally a spritz of salt. And remember now guys that this egg mixture actually has vinegar in it, so this is different from the others in that sense. And this one has come together the best in terms of formation. For all the almond flours that I've been using, this one came together the best for me to form, and actually feels like me making my normal flour dumpling. Look at that, nice and smooth and everything. So I'm going to color this and put it in the bag. So now guys, I have food coloring all over my hands, but I'm going to put this. And now for the final batch that I'm going to test today, I have 1/4 cup of coconut flour, to which I'm going to add a spritz of salt, egg, 1 egg with a tablespoon of vinegar, and a teaspoon of psyllium husk. And I'm going to mix all of this together. What I'm discovering guys is the one that are the ones that I use the vinegar and egg, it just feels better. The consistency just feels, while I'm making it, both for the almond flour and for the coconut flour, the consistency feels more natural to that flour dumpling that I'm used to. I still have some food coloring on my hand. So let's see if this will also be the case in the end result once we boil them. But in terms of preparing it and forming the dumplings, the ones with the vinegar and egg feel better. I'm gonna have to use a double color on this because I'm out of colors, so I'm probably gonna mix 2 colors so that I can identify this batch. So I've put both some red and some blue in order for me to identify that this is going to be the coconut flour with psyllium husk and vinegar. So guys, we're at the end of phase 1 of this boiled dumpling experiment, and here we have in this first bag the 1/4 cups of almond flour, half of an egg, and a spritz of salt. Beside it, 1/4 cups of coconut flour, 1 egg, and a spritz of salt. All we'll be able to determine from the difference in how both these dumplings perform is to see whether or not the almond flour will perform better than the coconut flour in terms of giving us a closer taste to that traditional Jamaican boiled dumpling. For the second experimental batch, we have again 1/4 cups of almond flour, half of an egg, a spritz of salt, and we've added this time a teaspoon of psyllium husk. To compare it, we have 1/4 cups of coconut flour, 1 egg, a teaspoon of psyllium husk, and a spritz of salt. And so what we're going to be able to determine between this second batch of dumplings is to see whether or not that psyllium husk adds anything to the texture or even to the taste of the boiled dumpling. Finally, our third batch here, we added vinegar to the egg. And so we have the same almond flour, egg, psyllium, salt mix, or coconut flour, psyllium, salt, egg mix, but we've added now that extra ingredient of vinegar to see how that will impact both the taste and the texture of the dumplings. And what I'm going to do at this stage, because I realize when I just dip these in hot water, they tend to still come apart. This experiment is going to place them in the refrigerator, allow them to harden before I slowly lower them into the hot water. And the idea that I'm having here is that as the dumplings lower slowly into the water, the egg and other binding agents will start to bind the flour together before the thawing process kicks in. And so the dumpling should not just shatter and dissipate. Let us see if that will actually be what happens in truth and in fact. I am going to put these now in the freezer for at least 4 hours for them to become hardened. The batches of dumplings have been in the fridge for 4 hours now. So I'm going to put a pot of water to boil and remove the dumplings from the freezer and lower each one into the hot water and allow them to boil for anywhere between 15 to 20 minutes. Let us see if this time we will have some success with the almond flour, coconut flour boiled dumplings. Five minutes have passed, guys, since I dunked these dumplings into the hot water, and I can tell that some of them have already just smashed to smithereens, but there are a few that are still holding on. I don't know which ones those are that are still trooping. So I have some troopers here, and I also have some flunks. I'm just going to wait until the entire 15 minutes pass to see if any of these survive, and then to test to see what they taste like, to see if I can recommend them as Jamaican keto almond flour or coconut flour boiled dumpling. So guys, after 15 minutes, this is what I have opened my pot to. Clearly some of the dumplings still went to trash, I don't know, but I'm about to take out now and see which ones survived and how they taste. This I can remember is the very first one, which was the almond flour with egg and salt. So nothing else but egg and salt. This one I don't know, I'd have to find the color on it to see what it is. Let's do, need to turn that one around before I'm able to figure out what that one is. This one is in a half solid, half mushed state. Try to take it out. It's the red one. It's almost, I would say it's almost disintegrated. I'm going to leave this one in because I'd call that one pretty much a fail. And this one, oh, this one looks pretty good. I'd like to see what this one is. I'm gonna put them over here, and I'm gonna get a fork to turn them around so that I can get an idea of which ones made it through the process, and to taste it as well to see what they taste like. Actually, let me add this red one as well. Get a fork. So this is not entirely bad. Of the 6 batches that we made, 3.5 survived. I would call this a, I'm looking at this one, inside still looks a bit dry, and this one was the red one. Need to figure out what that batch was. This one, oops, this one is the blue. Let's see how that feels. That cut very nicely. I'm gonna taste it as well. Show it to you and taste it. The dough looks very cakey, almost as if when you cook cake. Kind of crummy look. I'm gonna taste it, guys, and let you know what it tastes like. It tastes pretty flavorless, I would say. Actually not bad. Not bad at all, actually. It's not bad. Let me try the others to see in comparison how that one fares. This also cuts quite nicely. You get that feeling of cutting through dumpling, and this is the green. This is the texture that we have here. Also kind of cakey, looking like cake. In other words, a little bit more crummy than you'd expect your dumpling dough to look. But let me taste it. Nice. I actually prefer this one to this. Both of them taste relatively bland, as in flavorless, but I figure some people would say dumpling tastes flavorless. So what I'm tasting is the taste of the almond flour, I think it is. Let me try this last one here. And this was the one that was not colored. I think it is the very first one. Also has the same texture. My favorite is this one, is the green. And the blue is a close second to the green in terms of getting that flavor of traditional Jamaican dumplings. Okay guys, I don't know if you noticed, but none of the coconut flour dumplings came out. So those were the ones that were just disintegrating in the pot. The only ones that made it through to the end were the almond flour dumplings. In fact, all the almond flour dumplings made it through, whether it was just the one with the egg, or the one with the egg and psyllium husk, or the one with egg and psyllium husk and vinegar. They all made it through. My personal favorite is the almond flour psyllium husk dumpling, I found that the one with vinegar added to it still retained the vinegar taste in the end, and I found that the one with just almond flour and egg tasted a bit too eggy for me. But to be honest, I really enjoyed the almond flour psyllium husk dumpling. It brought back memories of growing up, and I am looking forward to putting some of these dumplings in my keto soup. If you haven't yet seen my keto soup video, please go ahead and check it out. And guys, if you enjoyed this video and benefited from it, please remember to share it with your friends, give me a thumbs up, and subscribe to my channel. And until next time, from all of us here at Nat 4 Islands Living, walk good.